Welcome to episode number 5 of the Sharps Report here on BettingPros.com. My name is Matt Perrault. You guys probably know me from the Daily Juice podcast, but we have started this new long-form conversation with people in the media, bookmakers, market makers, and professional sports gamblers. Each and every week you get this podcast on Wednesday, and this week we're really psyched to be joined by a guy who I can't identify as to who he's with now, but he's a longtime media member who's been with us for a really long time here for a variety of things. He's helped me out a ton since I moved here to Vegas. His name is Patrick Everson. He's actually changed his Twitter handle since he has gone into this new venture, but Patrick Everson joining us here on the Sharps Report. Patrick, how are you, man? Good to have you on.
I am great, and I am happy to be on. Congratulations on this venture of yours as well. This is fantastic.
Well, give me the new Twitter account because it's a new one now since you've moved on to a new venture which cannot be named yet at time of time.
Coming soon, I promise. The count's the same, so if you're already following me, if you were following me previously, you're still following me now. But if you'd like to check me out, if you haven't done so yet, obviously I'd be grateful to anybody out there listening. And it is Patrick E_Vegas. Kind of similar to the last handle, but just a slight change. Patrick E_Vegas.
Okay, so give people a quick bio. You've been covering the sports gambling industry for a really long time. Give everybody a little bit of a quick rundown as to what you've been doing over your career.
Well, I spent a good chunk of my career in newspapers, and most of that time was at the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Moved out here in 1994, and I was on the sports desk most of that time, and it's pretty much inseparable when you're covering sports in Las Vegas to have the sports betting angle. That they go hand in hand. It's, like I said, completely inseparable. So, learned a lot through some of it through writing, a lot of it because I was on the production side, a lot of editing and so forth. And I learned a lot of it through that, just reading an awful lot. And then starting in about 2005, 2006, started dabbling in some freelance work with some sports betting sites, and ultimately with covers in around 2009, 10, was off and on with them doing some freelance work for a few years. It wound down a little bit as we all tried to fight our way through the recession, and picked back up again a little bit later. And then ultimately in 2016, Covers made the move to bring me on full time as basically not only their Las Vegas correspondent, but their U.S. correspondent because they're a Canadian company. And so I was with Covers as their senior writer for the last 5.5 years. Tremendous run. I'm super grateful. They gave me an outstanding platform, and I'm really pleased with everything that I got to do and all the support they gave me. Just got a tremendous opportunity to jump in with a startup that's going to be based here in Vegas. There's a bunch of Las Vegas people behind this project that probably have to be a little bit deeper into the gaming industry to recognize the names, but they're very good names, and I'm excited about it, no question.
Well, I'll be watching for that. Obviously, that big announcement coming down the pike here in the very near future for you and your new venture. But let me ask you about the career you've had and the changes in the overall reporting that you've seen. How different is it now to report in the post-Pabst world? And is it easier or more difficult to get information?
It's generally easier to get more information. And this was something that was even sort of moving that way before the decision came down, thankfully. And I mean, I like to think that I helped bring that about. What I started doing almost immediately when I moved into my full-time role with Covers back in April of 2016 was doing reports literally from sportsbook floors, video reports talking about, how games are being bet and why lines are moving and where the sharps are and where the public is and so forth. And it was, at that time, there were only, maybe 2 or 3 outlets that would give you much in the way of information that you could put out there, and a lot of outlets didn't want to really give anything out. But social media, there's so much at everybody's fingertips now, and I think also just some of the outlets that recognize that it was it was good for them to get their name out there and how things are going and how games are being bet and so forth. Pretty much all the others have followed suit. Now, what I wish, there are some more than others. Some will put out very general information that for some people is enough. A lot of people seem to really enjoy the betting splits. But betting splits without context, I put it out there a lot because a lot of times it's the only thing I'll get. and some of my followers and some people who've read me over the years on covers and elsewhere, they can glean something from that. And if they can glean something from that, then more power to them. I would prefer to have a little more context, and that's what I'm trying to get more of these sources to do, is give me a little meat behind these numbers. What, I understand, that 70% on tickets and 80% of money are on one side, but can you give me some context? Where was the money at? What price did it come in at? Why did you move? That sort of thing. So I'm working on that, but that just the fact that we're getting this type of information from, I mean, there are probably 10 sportsbook outlets I could reach out to right now and get something on the Indians-Reds game that's coming up here pretty shortly. We're talking on a Monday. So, that's not something that was the case 5 years ago. It was limited to a few sports books. And obviously we only had a few sports books operating in the legal jurisdictions here in the United States because it was pretty much all Las Vegas. But even over time, more have gotten involved. I've had more just in the last few weeks that have come to me and said, hey, we want to start doing this. We see what you're doing with all these other books across the country. We want in on this. I'm like, well, you give me access and I will put it out there.
What is the difference, or do you have a difference between a news story and or a book that wants a big bet publicized, or they want information put out there for whatever reason, meaning they're taking that wager knowing that they're going to publicize the wager through somebody like you? Do you care one way or the other why it's coming to you or how it's coming to you in terms of their end goal?
Not necessarily. I don't care too much. I mean, I like to know them, and I think people like to, generally speaking, and there's been some polling on this. So David Purdom and others have done some stuff with this. The people generally are really interested in these things, and oftentimes they're like, "I'm rooting against that guy. I hope he loses $450,000 in the Super Bowl." I'm not that way. I want to see these guys do well. I mean, I want to see the books run a good, fair business, and I want to see bettors enjoy themselves, have a good time, and make some money too. So. I do think there's a middle ground there. So and I hope more books manage to find it. But I just think the interest there is so great and it's intriguing. Now, I will say I have kind of dialed it down a little bit. You and I talked about this in the previous iteration of our podcast, and kind of some information there soon. We'll see. I backed off a little bit on really publicizing some of these wild parlays, only because, not because I'm happy if somebody turns a little into a lot. It's definitely a good thing, and I'll put it out there from time to time, but maybe not quite as much, because I don't want to give people the wrong impression that this is something that happens regularly and that it's easy to do. Parlays are a bookmaker's best friend. They love parlays. That's where the books tend to make their money, not on the straight bets, on the spread or the total or the money line. They make their bones on parlays that don't come through. So I try to be, I try to proceed with a little caution there. I want to get it out there and let people know, have fun with the parlays. I guess that's what I say. If I put it out there, I'm like, hey, remember, this is a parlay. You're having fun here. This is much harder to do than just win a game or even two games. If you're talking 3, 4, 5 game parlays on your NFL Sunday, it's a tough chore. So I do balance a little, because I know there's a big, there's a publicity hunt here on the sportsbook side, which I understand. I do try to balance it a little bit, but if it's a big play on a side or a total or whatever, I'm like, let's put it out there and let people have at it.
My only question, if I was in your shoes, and this is something that is nearly impossible to do. I know you have done this in the past, but I'm not sure everybody does this, that you actually have a chance at times to talk to the player themselves and the person who's actually put the bet in. So there's not, you don't need to worry about, am I being told information that actually is accurate? If the gambler themselves is the one that's saying, hey, Patrick, I'm placing a wager at X, Y, and Z, and then you can confirm it with the sports book that they actually did take that amount of money. Right. Do you ever feel that way where you're kind of like, in a news world, you would have multiple sources, if you will. You'd have 2, 3 sources. It's very difficult in the sports gambling world because only the book knows. Only the book knows they've taken that wager. Does that one level of confirmation, does that ever cause you pause? Does that ever become a problem with you when it comes to a wager that comes by you via either email, text, phone call, whatever it might be?
Right. It's a really good point. And I think it does, but what I feel like I've done pretty well, what I hope I've done pretty well, is I've cultivated these relationships well enough that the one source is a really good source. Now, that said, oftentimes from certain companies that now operate on more of a national level than just the Las Vegas level, as was the case just a few years ago pre-PASPA, I may get something from national sent to me. And then if I know where it came in, like if I know which book probably took it, even though it's their national representative shooting it out to me, I'll call that specific book in that specific state. And at least get, even though it's the same company, at least get two people saying the same thing. So that ultimately helps me feel a little better. And sometimes it works the other way too. I get some really good information locally, for example, and I know it's accurate, but I also know that nationally the head honchos are going to want to clear that for publication. So then I reach out the other direction, and they'll, 9 times out of 10, they'll confirm it. And every now and then it'll be a customer that they know doesn't want that information out there. Basically, a customer could identify him or herself if they saw that. It'll be like, oh, that's me. I don't want that out there. So I do try to, I always single verify is definitely a little touchy, but I feel like my sources are good enough and respected enough, and that I'm respected enough that they wouldn't lead me astray. And that I've got enough sources at each shop, locally or regionally or nationally, that hopefully I can double check on it too if I'm ever that concerned.
How do you feel about the Mattress Macs of the world, the guys who are looking after, who maybe are placing a bet knowing that they're going to get the ink, the run, the print, the publication, whatever you want to call it, but in reality they got kind of an ulterior motive because their company is running, it's a hedge more than a wager, or they know the publicity will be good enough that, hey, if I bought $500,000 in advertising, I'd get more if I just drop $500,000 on a bet because of what's going to get picked up by whomever is covering the sports gambling industry. Where are you on those guys?
Oh my, look, what I will say is Jim McIngvale is a real nice guy. I've talked to him on the phone a couple of times. I've met him in person once or twice. And he's a nice guy, and he's a great businessman, and I have no problem with that. This is a guy doing business, and he's not doing anything. He's not doing anything illegal. He's got a great furniture operation, and he likes his home teams, and he likes to hedge against those furniture promotions he does, tie them into his bets with teams. It's not, to me, I feel it's run its course a little bit, but if he continues to enjoy doing it, I certainly have no issue with that, but it's not quite the same as, the weekend warrior who's got a big bankroll and rolls into Vegas for a couple of days and it's just firing left and right. And it's the same person, and you can even kind of intimate that on social media. Hey, there's a guy in town and he's just going off. He was firing all day Saturday on colleges. He's going again today on NFL. I remember a couple of years ago, there was a guy in bowl season, and it was just insane what was going on. Just huge bets all day long, and everybody knew it was the same guy, and a lot of people were really engaged on social media. And I feel like you're getting more of people want to engage with that more. And I think people enjoyed engaging with, Mattress Mac and so forth, and some of his plays early on, 3-4 years ago, even before PASPA, where he had some the Astros-Dodgers series, I believe, where he had really got involved for I think it was kind of the jumping on point. Might have been the Super Bowl ahead of that, but it was right around there. I think it was really intriguing then. Like I said, now I think it's a lot. It's a little different than, like I said, it's not as engaging. It's just something that happens and you put it out there. And like I said, more power to him for doing it. When the promotions, when it falls his way on the promotion side, then his customers, then the Vegas books do well. And when it falls his way on the customer side, then the Vegas books take a ding. But I certainly don't mind him supporting the sports book employees. Those people work hard and deserve a few bucks when he makes such a bet that doesn't go well for him.
Patrick, for a guy who's been around the sports gambling media as long as you have, what's a mistake that you see that's being made right now in sports gambling media? Is there one thing that you would like to see corrected?
That's a really good question as well. You're full of good questions today, Matt, which is no surprise. I'm a little bit concerned about the glut of advertising. I think that I mean, I know you got to kind of get your brand out there, especially now that all of this is in so many different states, and you want to find your way onto, the game platform. You want to be on during, Fox NFL Thursday night, or, NBC on Sunday night, ESPN Monday night, and throughout the day on Sunday. I understand that. I do think it would behoove the sportsbook companies overall, writ large, I guess, to put it that way, to kind of think about this just a little bit, because I don't think you want it to overwhelm the viewer, because not every viewer is into this. And in fact, probably most viewers aren't. But I think if you handle it, properly at a little bit more controlled level, then some of those people who aren't even casual players yet might think, that's kind of interesting. I might check that out. But if like every commercial break, you're getting a sports betting commercial every single time, I do think that's a little bit of an issue. And I recall a couple of years ago, I was at a sports betting conference back in either New Jersey or New York. And this, that was brought up as something that was a real trouble spot across the pond in England. They were having, real issues with it, just taking over a broadcast, or at least the commercials on the broadcast, in some cases both, So I just think, dial it down to 7, 6, turn that volume down just a little bit. While like I said, I recognize they've got to advertise. They've got, there's, gaining, customer acquisition and customer retention are so huge in the space right now, especially since most of it is done from the palm of your hand. You got to find ways to meet them. And I understand the TV advertising during games and so forth is the way to do it. I just think we got to be a little careful there. And I think it would behoove sportsbooks to take that advice.
Okay, so and this is funny because I've had this exact conversation with Dave Sherapan, a guy you and I both know really well, and
yes.
You guys both have been in for a really long time, and you both say the same thing. Okay, hold on. It's a little over the top, guys. We got to be careful, because you both have said this. The majority of people watching aren't interested, which is really kind of funny for me, being in the bubble that I'm in, to kind of be like, well, what do you mean not everyone's interested in doing this? Like, of course everybody's interested in doing this.
Right.
But the reality is that that's simply just not the case. Is it the responsibility of the books to tone it down, or for the media companies who have the platforms to say, hey, we don't want to have every single break have a sports gambling advertisement in it. We want to give the audience a little bit of a break. It's hard to say no to money, all about advertising.
Yes. But
who's going to be the guardrail? Who should be the buffer?
Yeah. And I think the only way it happens is if it would be nice, ideally, if both of these sides came into this conversation and understood that the broad audience that you get on Sunday Night Football, it's people want to know. Even some of the people who don't necessarily gamble do find it interesting. Mm-hmm. But overall, you just don't want to inundate them. And it'd be nice if the stakeholders in this, which are the books and the networks, could come to some sort of consensus, some sort of middle ground where, like you said, we're not cutting to a sportsbook commercial every single time we go to break. And certainly not like, I don't know if it's happened. I'm sure it's happened. I'm sure there's been situations where it's been 2 in a row coming out of break. It's like, okay, wait a minute. Can we at least keep it to 1 per 2-minute break or whatever it is? But I would think it would really look good for the sportsbook industry. I had a light go out on me here. Sorry. It would look really good for the sportsbook industry if they put their foot forward on this and said, look, this is part of a responsible gaming position that we hold to be true. We don't want people smacked in the face with this constantly. And in promoting a responsible gaming message, part of that is not messaging constantly about sports betting. So I probably would lean toward the sports books, though it sure would be nice if the networks are taking that money. And I think the networks have a role to play in responsible gaming as well in this rapidly expanding era.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the interesting things is that FanDuel and Draftkings both were involved in the daily fantasy explosion. So they've kind of gone through this. They've seen what happens when you inundate and you overwhelm, because politicians pay attention then. Like you can make a case that Draftkings and FanDuel may not have been in as much hot water with every state going through their laws saying, okay, is DFS gambling or is DFS, not gambling and trying to find how their language is if they just did not go over the top. But here we are again, kind of rewriting or making the same mistake that was made last time, where we're just going to open season and fire on the communities, and people get annoyed. And that's where, hey, I got a 14-year-old kid watching this baseball game. Why is he seeing 8 advertisements for sports books every single time we go to commercial? So I'm with you. That's my concern with it. And I hope that we all kind of pay attention to it this coming football season, because I think this is the tipping point that you're talking about. I think this is the year that it's going to feel like it was 2014 all over again with daily fantasy.
Right.
And we're going to see everyone, every break, every book. If you have a national platform or stage right now, you're coming in on Monday night, on Thursday night, on Sunday night. You're going to want to be a part of the broadcast in some form or fashion, whether it be a bug, an advertisement, a segment, something. And I think a lot of us might go, that this kind of feels like repeating history.
Yeah, and see the problem with this. I'll fix this light in a second, by the way, too. Since like half my face is shadowed. Sorry. Yeah. The other issue is with this, and I think they're doing this in the UK, is if the books don't step in and play a role here and treat it as kind of a responsible gaming message, and like I said, it would be nice if it was in conjunction with the networks that have the broadcast rights. If they don't, and it goes like that, then the federal government might step in. And I think what you don't want is any more government intervention than is necessary. Now, that is not me saying that there's no government intervention necessary in sports betting. I'm just saying there's an appropriate level of regulation. Try to find that point and don't let it go further, but don't let it go lower. So, and I think most states have kind of found that. I know I'm for sure Nevada has found that balancing act, although there are some regulations, we can touch on that another time, that need to be adjusted here in Nevada, especially based on what's going on nationally. But what you don't want is to get it to a point where legislators feel like they need to take this into your hands and take it into their hands, take it out of your hands when you had an opportunity to control the message and keep it the way you wanted, instead of having government saying, here's how you have to craft that message now, and here's how often you can craft it or how unoften you can craft it. You don't want to get to that point, I don't think.
Yeah, I'd agree. And it's a perfect stepping off point where we can get into some current news, some things that came down today, because I think you're a perfect guy to talk about what is going on with Barstool Sports and Penn National Gaming in the conversation with Major League Baseball. Because, for a long time, you couldn't get a peep out of Major League Baseball. If you were calling up there for a quote about a gambling story, or you're calling about their position on sports gambling or their position with PAPSBA, it was like, yeah, nope, we're not interested. We're not a fan of this. We don't want to be a part of anything to do with sports gambling. And obviously now they're full bore into sports gambling, locally, nationally, regionally, whatever you want to talk about. What do you make of Major League Baseball potentially, and it's only a 50-50 prop right now, and then I guarantee it's going to happen, but if Barstool Sports with Penn Gaming and The Score, their $2 billion acquisition that they made last week, if they air a Major League Baseball game, if I told you that 5 years ago that was going to happen, how would you have responded?
I would say there's no way that's happening. I'm not even sure I would have said that was happening 3 years ago. And I'm not just speaking strictly to Barstool here. Let's just, speaking in generalities, if this was FanDuel or DraftKings or any other, just a major media site that happens to have a stake in sports betting as well, because Barstool is operating on kind of both sides of the fence here. There's a media arm, and then there's the sports book. And that probably gets blurred sometimes, but I'm sure it doesn't. It's blurred with every company now. They're all kind of got their hands in the media space as well as the sports betting space, which I understand. You want to have that content arm. I totally get it. So I would have been like, no, this isn't going to happen. But look, we've seen an awful lot unfold over the last 36 months or so. It's been unbelievable, the progression, and I think most of it has been progression. I think there has been a little bit of regression, some things that need to be addressed, but I think most of it's been progress. I'm not averse to this necessarily, because especially if something like that were to lean heavily into Barstool Sportsbook content,
it will,
because this is who's bringing you the event. So if you're watching this event through them, that's going to be part of the bargain there. Now, that said, I still think whoever it is, again, this isn't casting aspersions on Barstool or FanDuel or Draftkings or any other company that might do this, but whoever it is, still, to touch on our previous few minutes here on the podcast, still has an obligation to put forth a responsible gaming message and not smash people over the head with this. If this is the only way that they can take in this game and they decide to do so that way, okay, maybe there's a little bit of a bargain being made here where, okay, I'm going to get a little more sports betting content. But still, I don't think I think you want to the best of your ability, treat it as much as an MLB broadcast game would typically be done, with perhaps obviously sprucing in a little bit more betting talk than you normally would. But let's not go start to finish, hey, we settled one prop on that pitch and another one on this one. I feel like that wouldn't send the right message if this is the only medium through which you're seeing this game.
It's a great point, and it's one that I made a couple of days ago that somebody, a buddy of mine who works in the Philadelphia media market said, remember that it's broadcasting, not narrowcasting.
That's a great term. Wow.
And it feels like we are entering into more and more of a narrowcasting world where if MLB goes and puts this on a Barstool app, on a Score app, on a Penn Gaming app, whatever they choose to do, it might be in all of them all at the same time, they're going to bring a Barstool broadcast. It's not going to be Bob Costas doing the game.
Right.
It's going to be Barstool talent doing the game. And I'm not saying they can't broadcast or call a game in a professional manner, but it will be different. That's why Major League Baseball would be giving it to Barstool. They want that audience, so they want it to be different, and their audience is going to expect it to be something of on brand when it comes to Barstool. But I'm with you on the point of I want and this may be a year or two away or whatever, but I have no problem with sports gambling content being on the screen or even having a sports gambling person that you throw it to like you do a sideline reporter.
Yes.
And you just say, hey, first quarter's underway, first quarter wraps up. What's the second quarter looking like? And you can do, game opened up at -3. We're not looking at a -4 number here. It's juice to the under here, juice to the dog, whatever you want to do for a 30-second clip. And then throw it back to you, whoever, back to the booth.
Exactly.
That I think is going to be hopefully something in the future that we do, because I think
know a guy who can do that.
Oh yeah. There we go. I'll raise my hand.
We've talked about this before, man. I'd be over the moon to be involved in something. That would be really cool.
Of course, and so someone just to throw on a broadcast to do that, and I think that hopefully is how
spurts.
How we bring it to the masses, where we just have it be part of the broadcast, like you would do an injury report, a weather report, whatever it might be. It's just content, it's information. But I feel like these narrowcasts, if you want to call them that, the betcasts or the broadcasts that are strictly just a sports gambling broadcast, I'll be honest, I'm their target market, and I can't really get into it more than 15, 20 minutes because I want to hear the game called. I want to hear Tony Romo. I want to hear Romo. I want to hear Jim Nantz. I want to hear the guys that are the Al Michaels and the Collinsworth. I want to hear those guys. I would like the sports gambling content too, but if you don't have the play-by-play, I lose something on TV. Maybe I'm old school, but I feel like I lose something.
No, I don't think so at all. I do think even people who are more in tune with this market, like you and I, and people who are even way more in tune than this market than you and I, still want that broadcast. They want to hear the play-by-play. They want the back and forth between the play-by-play caller and the commentator. They definitely love it. They want to hear what Tony Romo has to say. And on our end, we want that even just so we can hear Al Michaels say, well, that's overwhelming or something like that. I mean, we want to know, we want to know that they're not ignoring this, because there is another part to this. The other side of this is that you cannot continue to ignore this. Okay. You can't be making it the centerpiece of your broadcast, but neither can you just ignore it from the start of the game to the finish of the game.
Well, I think
you got to kind of acknowledge it a little bit.
Isn't it more important at the end of the game for the broadcasters to have an idea, especially in blowouts, when your entire audience is only watching for one reason?
Exactly. And they should acknowledge when it gets to that point, late third quarter, early fourth quarter, they should shift gears a little bit. And I'm not saying go overboard, but they should shift gears a little bit and say, in case you're interested, here's why people are, might still be tuning into this game. This is what William Hill at Caesars said, or Caesars at William Hill, or whatever Caesars and William Hill is now. To help people understand there are still things in this game that matter to a not insignificant portion of the audience. So I think while you want to catch the broadcast of Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth and Tony Romo and Jim Nantz and so forth, and the byplay there, it's also interesting to hear when and if they're going to bring that up. And honestly, I do think in most games, especially near the end, even if it's not a blowout, if it's near the end and you're close on any of these facets, and it's an interesting element to just quickly inject and let people know it's out there, last 2 minutes, here's what's going on.
And stop the wink. Stop
exactly.
the
you don't need
reference that's not really there. The Al Michaels like, oh, that was significant to some people. Like, Stop that.
I mean, look, I kind of like the wink, but go ahead. Do the wink and then say, here's what I mean.
Yeah,
let's throw this in. Let's give this 25, 30 seconds because this is going to be pretty relevant to a good portion of the audience. And half of that good portion of the audience needs it to go one way and the other half probably needs it to go the other. Or maybe it's 70-30, but still there are a bunch of people who need it to go one way and a bunch of people who need it to go to the other. And it's a fascinating dynamic that I think needs to be introduced more. Now, again, totally sticking with my original point of don't overwhelm people with this, but I also don't think you're doing the broadcast you're doing service to the broadcast in this day and age with like half the states in the country now having legal regulated sports betting. Like I think 20 or so are up and running and more are on the way. Yep. I don't think you're doing a service to your viewers if you don't know that. If you don't know that as part of your game plan going in between the play-by-play person and the color analyst and anybody doing commentary and down on the sidelines, if you haven't versed yourself just a little bit in the spread, the total, maybe the money line, if you got an upset brewing, then I don't think you're doing your homework anymore.
I would agree. I think John Anik, who calls the ESPN fights up for the UFC, does an incredible job because John's a gambler. He understands it. He lives a life, but he references it all the time of like, he'll just say, man, the live odds have shifted given where we were going into the fight with this heavy favorite. Now a dog going into the third round. This is clearly indicating just those types of references that are part of the broadcast. He's educated. He lives the lifestyle. He understands his audience. And that's why he's so good at doing it. We need more guys like John Anik who are doing their homework, who are, up to speed on what's going on. Cause I do think we're going to see more live odds being put on the screen and more live odds being flashed either in commercial breaks or coming out of commercial breaks or whatever it might be. And, DraftKings is the one that's doing that for the UFC now as the official provider for odds for the UFC and on ESPN for UFC broadcasts. And something happened today, Patrick, that you referenced our previous podcast venture that we were together. You and I used to talk about when is DraftKings coming to Vegas? Well, it's kind of crazy that today is the day we're talking because DraftKings is coming to Vegas. And they bought the Golden Nugget, and not just buying their online properties, but they bought their brick and mortar as well. So they're going to be in Laughlin, Nevada, and they're going to be in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Yes, sir.
And we're going to see DraftKings operating at some point here in Las Vegas. What does that do, one, given that they've got two offices already here? They've been eyeballing Nevada forever to open up. But who else does that mean? FanDuel comes in behind at some point as well. Now that DraftKings may be coming to Vegas.
Well, FanDuel or Barstool or what have you. I believe Penn still has a stake in a couple of properties here, so that could be in the offing as well.
Tropicana, right?
I think Tropicana is a Penn property, and I think the M may be a Penn property too.
Oh, I think you're right. So you can flip right there. Boom, you can flip both those books to Barstool Sports. Yep.
Yeah, that's a possibility too. So it certainly opens the door for that. And from a competitive standpoint, those books that are on the outside looking in now, but have a way to get in, or even if they don't, are probably looking for a way, I would think, because you don't want to give up that market share. Because, okay, look, we all know New Jersey is beating Nevada in monthly handle every month, but New Jersey's got a tremendous population base to draw from and has got a couple of regulatory advantages that Nevada really needs to iron out, and I think Nevada will ultimately. But the bottom line is Nevada has been setting monthly, short of the pandemic, they've been setting records for monthly handle month after month after month, and that's because people still want to come here to do their thing. They have their fun learning how to they learn how to do it in New Jersey and Pennsylvania and Iowa, and then they're like, all right, guys, let's go to Vegas. Let's do this in the sports book. So Vegas is doing just fine despite having competition across the country now. So I don't think anybody is going to want to cede that market to a competitor. So I do think more is to come. But what I hope also comes with this is, look, if DraftKings is running the sports book at the Golden Nugget right across the street from Circa, let's compete here, okay? Let's not have 30 and 40 cent straddles at by the time you get to minus 165, okay? I think that will be interesting to see. I don't know if what that will mean is that DraftKings will revamp its model nationally, or if they'll just have a regional numbers. They could go either way. And look, I understand that I'm not going to tell them how to run their business, because those guys are smart people who've made a ton of money and they know how to do business and customer acquisition and all that. But what I am saying is I would hope that they are looking to compete with the guy across the street. And I would think they would be. I don't know how you can't. If you're right across the street from Matt Metcalf and Jeff Davis and so forth, it's like, those UFC numbers better be real spot on. And so if that happens, and I almost think it has to, I don't know how it can't. And honestly, William here, I think most of the books here in Vegas, William Hill here in Vegas, the Superbook, of course, Win and BetMGM. If you look, Circa and Superbook often are the lead the way. But if you like playing at other books, if that's where your accounts are, if that's where it's easy to fund and so forth, you're not generally, now you need to shop. I always recommend shopping, but you're not going to get completely doused by the numbers there, because they do compete to a degree. Yep. If this means that DK or FanDuel or whoever else comes in is going to add another layer to that competition, and they're going to put competitive numbers out there against Circa, then that is awesome for the bettors. That's a good thing. So I hope that is part of the end product of what may happen here.
What do you make of the menus? And this is kind of coming from a conversation I had with the folks at Betfred, where they're still not regulated yet in Nevada, but they have long said to me, when we do go legal, our betting menu is going to change. Nevada, we offer so many more things than what's available right now. Well, that's DraftKings and FanDuel as well. That's probably the number one critique or anger point I hear from people here, where they'll go, man, why can't I bet that there's no book in Vegas offering a prop on that player? Because they'll go not just LeBron, they'll go to like the sixth or seventh man on the Lakers. And Vegas books just don't do that. They don't see the edge or the margin, or they don't have a guy who has the time to be able to go and set a number that's going to be worthwhile for them. Do you see Betfred, DraftKings, someone of that ilk, if they come in here, what's more likely? They go by the BetMGM model, where BetMGM has Nevada and then they've got everything else across the country, or that it will be all one app where you'll be able to get the same odds here in Nevada that you do in Jersey?
Yeah, I assume you and I probably both talked to Brian Bennett, I'm guessing. And that's a really good question. I hadn't thought to ask him that yet. But I would assume if they're saying, look, this is our model, this is what we go with, that I assume they're going to have quite an expansion, and maybe that puts some pressure on others to expand. But I do think a good point is made by those that aren't jumping into the water to have, 100 props or whatever, that, watch how all these markets are being priced as well. You need to, it's great that it's offered, but if there's no price sensitivity for the customer, that's, it's not necessarily good for the customer. So I would hope that if,
but Patrick, they don't care. That's the problem. The customer doesn't care about price. The customer doesn't care about the price. I mean, in Nevada, that's the one point where we haven't. I think that's the next step for the general public better to learn to be sensitive to the price. Nevada people are damn sensitive to the price.
Yes,
but the guy in Illinois who just started betting last week,
exactly,
he doesn't care.
It would care. Exactly, and that's the thing. But if you come here, people are sensitive to the price. Yeah. You're right about that. And I'm an avowed public bettor. I'm not doing deep analytical dives. I just, I do listen to some smart people from time to time, and I follow smart people on Twitter, and they sometimes send me a certain way. And I think that's good. I mean, that's part of informing yourself a little bit. When I'm betting, say, Olympic golf, I'm going to go to 3 or 4 different apps on my phone, and I'm gonna try to get the best price on the guys I want to play. And inevitably that will mean, it might lead me more to one book for 2 or 3 of those guys, but maybe the other 2 guys I take at one, but I may have 5 golf bets at 3 different books. And that's because Vegas does tend to bring out the level of competition. Doesn't bring out the humongous menu. Now if Betfred can find a way to thread the needle and do both those things, then I think you might see Vegas, the other Vegas books follow suit. And I think, just from what I've seen early on from WynnBET, I think they're trying to do some of that stuff. They've been really creative over the summer here, and I'm excited to see what else they're going to have.
Oh my gosh, they're signing every big celebrity in the market right now, from Shaquille O'Neal to Chris Long to Chad Ochocinco, and my goodness gracious, are they locking down a lot of the big name brand ambassadors?
And
very
they got
similar,
some smart people in the risk room.
Yeah, they do, and very similar to what happened in New Jersey when Jersey launches. You had all the different Jet players and Giant players getting scoffed up, and now WynnBET's coming in and doing that along with these big name athletes. Let me ask you this question about what happened in June. I know you're always reporting and looking at the numbers across the country, but June sportsbooks in America posted an 8.64% national win rate, which cleared $300 million in monthly revenue for just the 4th time since we got to the post-PAPSPA era. That's including the entire country: Nevada, New Jersey, Illinois, Tennessee, take your pick. What does that tell you about how the books are doing right now post-June when they're posting numbers like this?
It's impressive, especially in June, but I think certainly what helped is, I know typically the Stanley Cup Finals and the NBA Finals are going on in June, but they're usually done by like mid-June, maybe by the 20th, 21st. You had, still kind of early round stuff going on well into, all throughout June, and then the finals into July. So the July numbers will be interesting as well, because the Stanley Cup and the NBA Finals both ended up in July with that schedule. I think that was a little bit of an unusual, well, it is. It's an anomaly. We're not going to have NBA, a full onslaught of NBA playoffs with all the teams that were involved throughout June. Normally you're down to 2 teams, maybe 4 teams. So I think that contributed to it, but still, look, that if not then, it would have been May. The numbers would have been May instead, in all likelihood. So I think it's a good harbinger for the sports books and for the sports betting industry in general. It's great to see that that summer revenue is like that, because then it makes you think, holy smokes, what do we have in store when the real sport comes around that totally drives the engine for American sports betting, and that is football, generally speaking, and specifically the NFL. College obviously is a huge driver as well, but the NFL definitely drives the bus. And if we're doing those numbers in June, and people are, more and more people are hopefully kind of coming out of the pandemic. I know there's some things we got to work our way through, but I do feel much more positive about this than most of social media. I feel good about this. And I think people are starting to feel better about it, and certainly better than they did last September, October, November. And those were pretty good months. So what it makes me think is, wow, what do we have in store 30 days from now, 60 days from now, November, December, playoff races, bowl games, all that stuff. I hope it's a sign that we're in for a really good few months.
I agree with you. Last topic before we wrap here. So we've got Florida, we have New York, and we have a couple of other states like Texas and California that are all kind of looking at this. First, let's start with New York. If New York does wind up going legal at some point, like they are talking about, now they got other problems going on with their governor and whatnot that's distracting them from getting this done. But when they do get sports betting done, and the governor was one guy looking to push it forward, but if they do get it done, how big of a game changer is that to the industry in your mind? And does that really sort of, neuter New Jersey in what the numbers Jersey has been putting up for the last 3 years?
That's interesting. I think, we got to see exactly what New York's final product is, because if it's going to be, really limited, New Jersey's got 14,
22.
15, 20, okay, 22 operators, a lot of shopping you can do. Maybe that's too many. I don't know. But if they're all staying in business just fine, then obviously it's not too many. If New York limits this too much and makes it too difficult for, say, skins to get to, say, off-track betting operators, or for sports bars like we have here in Vegas, like PTs being able to have a Will Hill kiosk or that sort of thing. if they limit it too much, and or because of those limits, the pricing isn't that good. And I understand New York's, all these newcomers generally aren't going to be that price sensitive, but enough New York City people have gotten such a good taste of what's going on in New Jersey that they are getting educated pretty quick, and they are a little bit price sensitive. And it's not the cheapest thing to go back and forth across the river. It's a pain in the neck. So you would have to do the calculus there. But they do need to put up a competitive product in the end, because they've got neighboring states that certainly have competition. So I think it's we'll just have to see exactly how competitive the governor and the legislature allow this market to be. I'm not a fan of the way they're trying to do it. I don't think it necessarily begets competition, and therefore I don't think it's good for the consumer. But to your point, a lot of these new consumers, they just want to bet. They're not price sensitive.
Well, I was going to get to this state anyway, and I can get to it right now because we have, as we tape here on a Monday, some breaking news. The Arizona Cardinals have partnered with BetMGM to open up the first ever sports book inside of an NFL stadium. That'll happen this season. This September, you will have at the Big Toaster in the desert a sports book operating at Arizona Cardinal games. What is your expectation for Arizona when they go legal here in about 3 weeks?
Well, there's been, and I saw throughout the day today, there's been some interesting dialogue on Twitter about this too. Not just about the BetMGM thing, as you said, is fresh, but just on Arizona sports betting in general. And that there's been some concern voiced about whether they really have all their ducks in a row to get this rolling in Arizona in a month. So, and that's the one thing you don't want to do, is roll out too soon with a product that's really not ready to go, because that's one way to turn people off in a hurry.
They've got 9 operators ready to turn it on the 2nd of September. That's they're coming out blazing in Arizona.
Yeah, and it might be fine. I mean, obviously, a lot of these operators we know well, and they certainly know what they're doing. But you certainly don't want to get off to a bumpy start here. You want to come out best foot forward. Look, I'm not surprised by the news at all. I mean, this was bandied about while they were doing the Arizona legislation. Could we, can we have partnerships? Can we do sports books on property and so forth? I think the way some of the wording in the legislation was initially was really poor, because it didn't mean to infer, I don't think, but it inferred that somehow the team would have a stake in the sports betting and how and literally it said the teams would operate the sports book. And I'm like, oh, no. Now that's not what they meant, but the language said otherwise. And that's a little bit of what concerns me about Arizona. And what concerns me, it's what's concerned me about every state to this point, is that the legislators don't know what they don't know, but they think they know, So you need to have more people involved who know and who understand the fine tuning of little points of language that make a big difference, because you can't have a sports team operating a sports book. Now, that's different than having a sports book being operated by a sports book operator leasing space at a stadium, or even being given space at a stadium if the stadium chooses to do that. That's their prerogative. But certainly the team can't operate a sports book. And that was there was some hullabaloo around that in Arizona a couple of months back. So I'm not surprised by it. I don't really have an issue with it. I think it's another way to engage people without getting in your face with it. If they walk by it while they're getting their popcorn and a beer or whatever, hey, that's kind of neat. Let's go check that out. They can choose to check into it or to walk by and get back to their seat. Rather than a commercial in your face all day long on the game.
At the Waste Management, having a sports book at the Waste Management is going to be unbelievable.
Oh yes. See, now I'm all for that. That tournament is. I mean, that makes perfect sense. That is a total Waste Management golf tournament move. That tournament is insanely different than any other golf tournament. The crowds are fantastic. And I think sports betting is par for the course, if I may say that, for that tournament. And I think it'll be very well received. I'm good with that too.
And then last state to break down, last topic to get through is Florida, where they are dealing with, obviously, the tribal nations that are down there that control gambling in the state. So they've got to get approval from them, essentially their blessing, in order to get this to be done. But if it is going to go the way it's being talked about, is it good for the industry if every single bet, both mobile and in person in a brick and mortar, that a cut of that goes to one tribal nation?
Wow. if the alternative is you don't have legal sports betting in your state, and in a state that is that populous and that sports mad, and a lot, and there's much like Las Vegas, Florida is a very transient state. A lot of people move to Florida from other states and bring their allegiances with them, and again, not the majority, but plenty of people enjoy sports betting, and they bring those sports betting enjoyment and their team allegiances to Florida with them. So the money's going to get bet somewhere if it doesn't get bet in Florida. So I guess that's the best way I can answer that, and that's been the case in all these states. It's like, look, you can put your head in the sand, and you can have the stupid regulations. Oh, well, you can't bet on our colleges. There's sanctity there. Well, you know what? Then they're going to bet on those colleges somewhere else, and you're not going to recognize that tax revenue. So you can feel holier than thou, but the money's going out anyway. So I think it beats the alternative of not having legal regulated sports betting in Florida. It is an interesting dynamic that has to be factored in. And I just think I would hope that from a regulatory perspective, from a legislative perspective, that the state isn't like, okay, well, then we have to up taxes and so forth to make sure we get our piece of the pie. Because if you do that, then that ultimately is going to get passed on to the consumer in the way of in the way of prices that aren't as good.
Absolutely. Patrick, do me a favor. Tell them where they can find you, and when you have your big career announcement, they can find all your latest content.
Oh, absolutely. I should have some more news on this coming very soon. And for the moment, if you're already following me, if you've been following me, you still are, but the handle has changed. And if you're not following me, please give me a follow at Patrick _Vegas, and that's on Twitter. And we'll be having a lot of fun with football season, as Matt can attest. It's a glorious time of year.
My friend, thank you for the time. This was a lot of fun to have you on. Really appreciate it.
I absolutely honored to be on, and we'll talk again soon.
That is Patrick Everson here on our latest edition of the Sharps Report.